Since recording our last episode, the war in Afghanistan is officially over, but bookended by yet another tragedy. 13 American service members and 169 Afghans were killed in a suicide bombing at Hamid Karzai Airport by terrorists representing the Islamic State of the Khorasan province. On today's episode, we discuss the evacuation and our frustrations at the lack of accountability in the government and higher command for both this tragedy and the tragedy of the last 20 years. This topic is not pleasant, and Zach, Stu, and I use more frequent, colorful language on today's episode than normal. Emotions are all over the place regarding current events, and that being said, if you or anyone you know are having thoughts of suicide or need someone to talk to, please reach out to the Veteran Crisis Line at 1-800-273-8255. We at the Boardwalk are not trained mental health professionals, but if you want to talk to us about this, you can always DM us on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. Welcome to the Boardwalk.
All right, welcome back to the Boardwalk. This is our 18th episode. We are now officially on our fourth month of talking about this, and so we're just fuck it. We'll just get right into the damn thing. It is September 1st as we record, so we are 2 days post the end of U.S. evacuation efforts out of Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. It turns out we did not need that last day on the 31st, which is probably not true considering the couple hundred Americans stuck in Kabul and the literal thousands of Afghans with special immigrant visa applications who should be on planes or really should be in the screening process to get to the States right now. So I guess we're going to start with that. Yesterday, Joe Biden addressed the American people once again, very poorly, as is becoming a trend with him. And Joe Biden keeps doing that thing that politicians do where they stick to the talking points, even though the talking points are wrong. He said once again, I'm not going to allow this to go on to a fifth presidency. I'm not going to extend the forever war, or in this case, extend the forever exit. But the problem is nobody's questioning the decision to fucking leave Afghanistan. And Joe Biden is falling back on that as if there is a big, group of people who don't have general in front of their names who disagree with the decision to leave at all. It's no the issue, and the Biden administration fails to grasp this. Obviously, they failed to grasp this. The issue is how it was done, because I think we can all objectively look at what has happened over the last couple weeks and say there shouldn't be 13 dead service members and another 170 dead Afghans, because this was fucked up from day one when they decided that we were going to do this at a Hamid Karzai International Airport instead of a place like Bagram.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, and just so everybody's clear that's listening, I mean, none of us are disagreeing with the decision to get out of Afghanistan, nor are we going to fall back on that talking point like Biden does. But like you said, Zach, he doesn't address it in he doesn't address the complete failure of these evacuation efforts. Something that probably, and I'm not a high level general, I'm not a 4-star general, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem to be all that difficult of a military task to evacuate people when we knew this was coming. You know, I understand it happened quick. I understand the Taliban were there faster than I mean, even we're pessimists, so we called it. We didn't call it that dark, you know. But I mean, they should have been evacuating these people months ago, knowing we were going to leave, and there's still 200 Americans there.
Yeah, it's not like we're losing any element of surprise by, evacuating non-essential personnel prior to our evacuation. I mean, we did it within the military when we were evacuating. There was no issue saying, hey, these guys need to be here, and these guys, you're going to be on the first plane home because we can prioritize people. But yeah, like you said, Kyle, an entire year of this crap, and it can't be called anything other than just a complete failure to plan. Like,
And 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 the thing about it, so not in yesterday's press conference, but in the other times that they've talked to President Biden, they asked him if he regretted the decision to do the exfil out of H. Kaya instead of out of Bagram. And he doubled down on it. It's like, no, we don't regret that. I talked to the generals, and that's what they all agreed on. So now, and we didn't, we recorded last week's episode before the 26th of August happened. So now I guess we get to kind of talk about the fallout from that. If the generals who are entrusted to make the decisions, be it Mark Milley, General McKenzie from CENTCOM, and in this case also Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, a retired four-star general, if they made the decision to evacuate out of HKIA and they made the conscious decision not to use Bagram, they need to be out of jobs. Not because I don't like them, not because of my political allegiances, which isn't to any major party, but because what they did was an abject failure and people died and it could have been prevented. And the example I'll use is when James Mattis was the Secretary of Defense for Donald Trump, he resigned. And he resigned because they had a fundamental disagreement on what to do regarding U.S. involvement in Syria. And that is what you're supposed to do. When you have a fundamental disagreement and you cannot, in good conscience, follow through with an order, you resign. Well, you know what? When you fuck up so royally bad the way that they did, you cannot and should not, in good conscience, expect to be the person up there leading troops to go to war. And a great example we've all seen now that colonel from the Marine Corps, Stuart Scheller, who was the battalion commander for the Infantry School East out at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, I believe. It may have been Quantico. I know it's on the East Coast. He made that video the other day in uniform, demanding accountability from these same people, General Milley, General McKenzie, Secretary Austin, and he lost his job, and deservedly so. So just for the people who are listening to this who really like what Colonel Scheller did, he did it in uniform. He called out his chain of command. He criticized U.S. policy while in uniform. There's only one response to that, and that is being relieved of your command. Even if he is right, which he is right to demand accountability, you won't find anybody on this podcast who disagrees with what he wants. You also won't find us disagreeing with the decision to relieve him of his duties.
No, yeah, absolutely. Like that kind of ties in. Like if people listening to this who aren't in the intel community, like you'll see people that have an issue with what Snowden did. Now, he revealed a lot of information, but he essentially did it in the wrong way based on his position and like the requirements for that position. That kind of falls into here. So we definitely agree with the sentiment and what he was pushing forward about accountability, but yeah, you have to do things the right way when you're in uniform, or else there are consequences. But the issue the issue that we have is that there aren't consequences for the people at the highest echelons who this failure really falls on. And at this point, I mean, I don't see any indication that there will be.
And have there ever been? I mean, have any of these people ever been held accountable for the Afghan war? I mean, not to my knowledge. I mean, I've got, stories of generals being held accountable for, I don't know, like having affairs with their aide de camps or somebody, you know what I mean? But it's like the abject failure of this war for the last 20 years. None of them, no American official has had to answer for the absolute failure, and they still don't. And you talked about at the beginning, Zach, like you've got people like Milley. I mean, and the lieutenant colonel, the Marine Corps lieutenant colonel that resigned his commission. I mean, close to retirement, he just offered his resignation. I mean, that's the thing to do. I mean, that's what they should do. If you're going to have any sort of balls, you need to resign. I mean, you're done. Like, you cannot make a mistake that bad and still keep your job and have 13 dead service members at a time when we shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be having to defend Hamid Karzai International Airport, and now they're dead, and there's no accountability for anybody in the United States as far as the people that organized or orchestrated this whole evacuation. It's a shame. I mean, somebody has to resign. Somebody needs to get fired, and it's not happening.
Yeah, and when you look at Colonel Scheller's his letter of resignation where he resigned his commission, I read it. And I thought it was pretty professional, considering I even thought his video was relatively professional, minus him being in uniform, right? But on there, like, his reason for resigning is loss of trust and faith in the command. And like, we're not in the military anymore, the three of us. But man, can you imagine being a fucking company commander right now, trying to tell your guys before they're going to JRTC or NTC or just like going to the fucking field for the weekend, like what we're doing this for. And you know that none of them have any faith or trust or confidence in these generals and in this secretary to lead this military. It's non-existent.
And I don't know what you say to all these. I mean, and they still haven't said anything. I mean, the Biden administration hasn't come out and said anything like to address 20 years of veterans. I mean, that's nearly like two generations of people fighting the
Yeah.
same war, basically. And there's no address. There's no explanation. There's no consoling from the administration. It's just like, well, it's over, and we messed up this evacuation. And going back to what we talked about earlier, like I've flown into Hamid Karzai Airport. I've flown into Bagram. I've flown into all of them, right? When I was doing the aviation thing. Hamid Karzai was maybe the least defensible airport I had ever flown into. Like were we not in Bagram? Did we already abandon Bagram when this evacuation started, or did we have people there?
I believe we.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Kyle. Yeah, like so for those who haven't been there, like Bagram is very, very defensible, and it also has the added benefit of not being in the middle of the giant capital of Afghanistan where the Taliban have already taken over. At least if we were evacuating from Bagram, we would have been able to get people inside the base and they wouldn't have been blocked from getting to the airfield. Like that's the biggest thing. We're hearing all kinds of things from people that are out there, from people that are trying to get friends and interpreters out, that Taliban are like shooting into the air when people try to get near the airport, despite what Taliban leadership has put out about letting people out of the country and things like that. They also have standing orders, or like they've also put out the sentiment that they don't want Afghans leaving Afghanistan. And we know how decentralized Taliban leadership is, to the point where lower level guys might just be doing whatever the hell they want too, and there's really going to be no like stopping them.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a big issue, and like when we see people like Zabiullah Mujahid and Suhail Shireen, that's the English guy's name, or the English speaking guy's name. Not the guy who speaks really good English, but the other guy that speaks English. When they come out and say shit like we're gonna protect women's rights and we're gonna be a lot more tolerable. Okay, yeah, you can enforce that shit in like Kabul where the world's eye is at, but I mean we've seen already reports in Ghazni and remote parts of Kandahar where that's not happening, and it's going back to the old Taliban regime of the 90s, right? And then we for some fucking reason we relied on the Taliban to be our outer ring of security at HKIA, right? When that suicide attack happened, the Taliban came out and their message was that there was an explosion in the sector of HKIA that the Americans were responsible for providing security for. Well, they had to get through somebody to get there. Okay, and you know what? The Taliban and the Islamic State in the Khorasan province, or as I will always call them, ISKP, not ISIS-K. There's no Khorasan in Iraq or Syria. ISK, they allowed these ISKP insurgents or extremists, what do you want to call them, through their security ring, probably intentionally, understanding what it is they were going to do. The two groups absolutely fucking hate each other, okay? But they're human. And at the end of the day, people will tend to work with their adversaries if it means they get to pick off a bigger adversary. And we continued after the fact to rely on the Taliban to provide that outer ring of security. All the while, the Brits and the French are sending their special operators into Kabul to grab their guys and their gals and their Afghan allies. And at one point, they started bringing in Americans. And if the reports are true, and based on just the amount of reporting and the number of sources, the commander of the 82nd, Major General Donahue, was pissed off because the Brits were making him look bad by doing what it is they trained to do. That they were embarrassing us. The fact that he would say that, I find to be, quite frankly, really embarrassing, because this is happening right at the same time where Joe Biden is giving one of his many press conferences, and he says, no military in the world has the capability to do what we're doing. And then, like an hour later, Secretary Austin, who is asked about making gun runs into Kabul, says, we don't have the capability. No, we have the capability, Secretary. We didn't have the willingness to do it. There's a big difference between the two.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we had all this big talk about how, oh, having 2,500 servicemen in that area was, really allowing us to keep security and to continue operations, which is total bullshit, by the way. But the fact that the Brits were outdoing us at what we were supposed to be doing and getting our own people out on top of theirs is just, it's embarrassing and it's ridiculous. And we absolutely should have been doing the same kinds of runs and pulling our people out. Like that's the entire reason that we're out there, to withdraw people. And so if you're going to have people there, and like other than pulling security at the airport, you should definitely be going out and getting our people.
And now, guys, I'm going back through old articles, and here we go. So this kind of answers my question about abandoning Bagram. And remember, I think we talked about it on one of the episodes how
July
we
2nd,
made that
right?
July 6th of July. It looks like is a BBC article saying that U.S. left Bagram Air Base at night with no notice. Afghan commander says so. Um, so 6th July, we're out of Bagram supposedly. So I suppose that means we turned it over to the ANA or the Afghan government, which we know fell rapidly. I wonder if the Taliban did not have control of Bagram by the time the evac started.
Well,
I don't know.
they probably did, right? So understanding that that was a bad idea, I have no doubt that the Taliban probably had control of Bagram by August 15th, right? But this is where you get people like John Kirby, who's a spokesman for the Pentagon, who says shit like, "Oh, we planned for everything." Well, clearly you fucking didn't plan for everything, because you didn't plan for this to happen, and I know you didn't plan for it because General Milley keeps saying that the Afghan military fell apart in 11 days. So he's clearly not following the intel. He's not reading what's being pushed up. And I know that because we were that intel provider. Like, this isn't a new concept where people in the Pentagon and in the White House just chose to ignore the facts on the ground. This has been going on for literally over a decade, right? There's the great Duffel Blog article. I've mentioned it on here before, where like the 19th consecutive ISAF commander says we're making great progress. When you look at who controls what, we didn't make progress. And when you look at who controls Afghanistan starting on March 1st, 2020, which is the day after the Doha agreements, the Taliban were just gaining ground one day after another. So to say that this happened over 11 days is disingenuous, and it's wrong. And the Biden administration and the Department of Defense and the State Department continue to blame the intelligence community, saying that this is an intelligence failure. They doubled down on that today. And we don't say this because we're in the intelligence field and we feel slighted, although we do feel slighted. We say this because it's just not fucking true, because I'm sure we were not the only people telling the truth when we were in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
mean, we know for a fact that we're not. I mean, we have our sources. We know for a fact that at the highest levels that the information is being pushed up. So whether they're listening to the information or not, I mean, I know it's a big trouble to read your fucking safety briefing that gets put together for you by 20 people every day, but it might be a good idea to read it and figure out exactly what's actually happening out there. The intelligence community isn't hiding things from leadership. Leadership at lower levels is hiding things from upper level leadership, essentially, if they
yeah,
aren't getting the right information.
yeah, and that leadership's then hiding it from Congress, and then that's how you get a war going on for 20 years, where people will literally lie and say that we're making progress because we've harped and we've hounded on this topic so many times, and it bears repeating because I don't know, people might be tuning into this podcast for the first time this episode. Like, intelligence reports were always bad. Everything was bad. I literally would sit down at that table every morning with a book of bad news. And I remember the colonel saying, "Oh, you got your book again." Like I titled that Army Green Notebook "Bad News" because, and people would give me crap all the time. Like, "Oh, you're so negative about everything. You're so negative about everything." But absolutely, I'm negative about everything because I can see it. I'm not an idiot, and it's 2016. The Taliban control all the rural areas of the country. They're administering government in the rural areas of the country, and we all knew at the time. It's just like, well, as soon as we leave, they'll just walk right into the provincial capitals and any of
Yeah,
the population centers.
yeah. It's ridiculous to assume that the Taliban weren't like poised for this from all of their areas of strength. I know for a fact. I used to cover Pektia. for a bit, and there's a couple districts in there that when in my first deployment back in 2012, Americas hadn't been in there like for years, and I'm pretty sure up to now, no American has stepped foot in those districts. Taliban have had their areas of control for over a decade at this point in a lot of places, especially Helmand and especially the border areas. And so it wasn't all that surprising that they're able to sweep out and just swarm and take over areas. The only real surprise was how fast they did it.
I mean, think about when we were in CAF, right? So by the time we get to Kandahar in 2016, that's the only installation in the province, right? And some of the guys we talked to now, Curtis and Luke from the Panjway podcast, they're at Kop Sperwengar in Panjway. That was 2012, right? And it seems like right after that, we just consolidated and we didn't have any sort of a presence outside of the airfield, right? And so
Yeah.
that applies to Helmand, that applies to Herat, that applies to Mazar-e Sharif, that applies to everywhere. We consolidated because the Americans understandably didn't have a taste for this war anymore. And so we reduce our troop numbers and we plus it up with contractors the best we can. But what we lose in that train advise assist element is the ability to actually shape and affect the battle space.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely not wrong. I mean, when we lose the ability to power project in the rural areas of the country where the Taliban is thriving, then we're going to lose that war already. We've lost the power projection. So we're basically sitting there interacting and interfacing with Afghan counterparts at the highest, at least on the green and white side. The only people we talked to were provincial governors, so the people at the highest level of the province. We rarely ever had any dealings with district level governors. I mean, we used to. I mean, they used to have advisors at the district level. We lost that, so we're basically just working at the highest level of the Afghan government to advise, assist, I guess, in a roundabout way. So when we lost all that ability, it was, it's pretty much over. We basically said we only care about the population centers, and that's all we would interface with. Meanwhile, we get these reports from our human collectors that go out every day. They do talk to people at a local level, and they talk to A&A troops on the front lines, and you get this really bleak picture at that time. So all these bleak reports and stuff come in, but General Nicholson or whoever's in charge, he's not interfacing with these people, right? He just collects the reports from us, right? Which never get to him because they get filtered out because they're so negative that the captain or the lieutenant colonel level is afraid to go tell the general level, and then the general level is afraid to go tell the 4-star level, and then he's afraid to tell Congress that the whole thing's fucked up, and it's all up the chain.
You mentioned that. Oh, go ahead, Stu.
Oh, and then compounding that at the general level, he's corresponding with the Afghan generals, and they always seem to get these shiny object issues where it's like, oh, this particular place is important to me, probably for some political or tribal reason, and so they'll constantly be trying to get us to fly our ISR over that area. Meanwhile, half of your other checkpoints are getting attacked by the Taliban on the daily, and you're doing nothing about it. So it's like the corruption and issues that we were facing there was just worse and worse as you go up the chain.
So some of this is going to be rehashing what we've discussed before, but like you said earlier, Kyle, this shit bears repeating. We talked about when our boss, Colonel Leesman, great guy, told General Milley that the Taliban was staring defeat in the face, right? And I think we all said we understood why he would do that, because he's in a tough fucking position, right? Being the 2 down there at TAC South, and he's got to project just like everybody else has to. And General Milley knew he was full of shit. This is when he was the chief of staff of the army, right? He knew it was a lie and that the Taliban weren't staring defeat in the face. Well, now he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So if he went into that position understanding what the reality was, what the hell? Why are they not, like Colonel Scheller said, why are they not banging their rank on the table and trying to throw it around to help shape things for good? Because they should have, right? We talk about the lack of accountability. One general in 20 years was dismissed for cause, and that was Stanley McChrystal, because his staff gave a really unflattering interview to Rolling Stone regarding President Obama. And you know what? He should have been relieved for that because those are the rules. The problem is all these other generals fail upwards, like we talked about with General Wafadar and down in Kandahar, right? They fail and then they get promoted. Like Mark Milley, he was giving a press conference today, or maybe yesterday. I was watching some clips today and talking about having firsthand experience getting RPGs and shit shot at him. Maybe, sure, I don't know. That's possible. But you know what? He failed fucking upwards because every year Afghanistan has gotten worse, at least going back to when we were there in 2016 and probably at least a couple years before that, really probably since that whole fake surge to get President Obama reelected ended, right? It's
Who is he?
gotten worse.
Brian Williams? Jesus.
It's gotten worse every year, and these guys keep getting promoted. And nobody can explain to me how the hell that happens. Because in the private sector, if I went to my job tomorrow and did a shit fucking job, and I proceeded to do that for a year, they're not going to make me the goddamn manager. They're going to make me unemployed.
Yeah, and we hammer on this so much, just talking about these high level leaders, because what you just said about Milley just really pissed me off just now. Because if he's going out in press conferences right now saying he knew how bad it was, then what the hell have we been doing for the past little while? If you knew how bad it was and you're a freaking 4-star or 3-star general, well then do something about it, you coward. Like, what are you doing? Are you that afraid to rock the boat when you have 4 stars on your chest that you don't want to end this stupid, awful war? Like, what
He's
is
got a
wrong with
president.
you?
There's a president in office who wants to leave, right? Like, what the
Right.
fuck? But when you watch the news over the last couple of days and I have all these retired generals on, man, none of them want to leave. And I don't think any of us are surprised by that, but none of them want to fucking leave. The problem is we're not plussing up enough soldiers. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. Senator Lindsey Graham, who's an absolute piece of shit, walking human trash if one ever existed, is sitting there saying, oh, well, we had 2,500 American troops in Afghanistan and they were providing stability. No, the fuck they weren't. The Afghans were losing ground by the minute. That wasn't stability. That was them doing a train, advise, assist mission. And by the way, why did we never train, advise, assist the Afghan intel element? Like, did you ever meet an Afghan intel officer or NCO?
Never once did I advise anybody in Afghan intel ever.
Because you would think people like us who have experience doing the fucking job would have been the ones who would have shown them this is how you collect intel, this is the OODA loop or whatever, this is how you apply PMISI, something, right? And they would have been subject matter experts being from Kandahar or Ruzgan or wherever the fuck they're from. Like they would have caught on to that shit a lot quicker than we would have, but we could have shown them the basic steps. I have no
I
idea
met
what an Afghan intel officer looks like.
I met a couple of them when I was doing Palantir stuff, working with the SFAB. The only problem is that we rushed so hard to get the SFAB out there that our SFAB guys were all infantry dudes, and they weren't properly trained for intel. So I was basically teaching the infantry dude I was working with how to do intel so he could teach the Afghans. That was an entire mess. That whole
Why wouldn't you just teach them?
it it's not my job. I was there. I was there
that.
to make. I was there
get
to
that.
make sure their programs worked good.
Did the SFAB really fucking improve anything?
Dude, I don't know. It was nuts. They like there was a bunch of stuff going on. I remember there was some stuff going on in Faryab, and they had a plan to drive out there from Kandahar. All kinds of there was a lot of I think it eventually started being like okay, but it was too late to really matter. But definitely at the start there was a lot of issues getting it implemented.
The
Stu, can you explain to our viewers, or sorry, our listeners, what an SFAB is? I got some feedback the other week, and somebody's like, "I love your podcast. I don't know what you're talking about half the time. There's sometimes you throw stuff around." Explain to our listeners what an SFAB is, in case they don't know.
All right. Well, so in the military, I think in 2017 or 2018, the military implemented a group called the Security Force Assistance Brigade, otherwise known as the SFAB, and it was a big deal. It was more of a big deal than when the the Space Force was implemented, people were actually incentivized to try to go out for SFAB. And the idea was, well, hey, we have special forces, and special forces train and build up our allies' special forces groups. Well, we want to kind of have the same thing, but for our like regular army counterparts. So they were supposed to essentially help us get in and better coordinate like training and collaboration with the ANA. And I think they worked with a couple other groups as well, like the I can't. There's so many acronyms I can't even remember half of them. But ANA and other Afghan like military groups in the area. So that, if I'm not wrong, that was the basic idea behind the SFAB, or Special Force or Security Force Assistance Brigade. I know a lot of SF guys were upset about it because it was this other group that was kind of stepping in on their territory, and they also had these like what color are their berets? Like
Brown. It was an excuse for a new
brown.
beret.
Yeah.
That's what the SFAB
Yeah,
is.
that's what it all boils down to. There's a new
Because
beret.
the
And
SFAB has already existed. It was called Train Advise Assist Command South. That's a fucking SFAB. It does the
yeah,
exact same thing an SFAB is supposed to do.
that's definitely the job that we were essentially falling in on when we were contracting down there. But they needed a new thing for it on the tail end of this 20-year war.
Yeah. So Kyle, you brought up like projecting strength from a military standpoint, right? Like being out there and going on patrols and being able to shape the battle space. When I kind of brought that up, so I'm at my in-laws right now, right? And my in-laws are like most people, right? They're not invested in this stuff like we are, and that's fine. That's how most people are. They're not soldiers or anything like that. But they asked me about, well, what if China tries to take Taiwan? And I thought, no. And then my second thought was, I don't think there's a single person on the planet right now that has any faith or confidence in Joe Biden projecting any sort of strength right now. Right. And that brings me back around to, I saw this great quote on a buddy of ours page. It's not a quote, it's an analogy regarding just how Joe Biden has handled this withdrawal from HKIA. For those listening, HKIA is Hamid Karzai International Airport.
It's the international airport in Kabul. It's not a
Yes.
military strictly airport, strictly military airport. Sorry.
Right. And so he said, imagine you go to the hospital with acute appendicitis. The doctor walks in and slashes open your belly with a machete. At the press conference discussing your death, the doctor says, look, we all agreed the appendix had to come out, and then leaves without taking questions. And that's a pretty good analogy for how the Biden administration has really handled all this stuff. And when I think about that question, like, well, what if China did try to go in and just like, formally retake Taiwan? Like, one, I don't think it's going to happen. But like, fuck, man, right now, is there a country on the planet that is concerned that this president has any sort of strength or any sort of gumption behind what he says? And with that, we talked about, I think Secretary Austin needs to resign. I think Secretary Blinken needs to resign. I think General Milley needs to resign. I think General McKenzie needs to resign. I think we agreed that all four of them need to resign. I would go a step. Go ahead, Kyle.
Oh no, I was going to say be careful because I'm just pulling up an article right now from Insider that says because we are calling on Austin and Milley to resign, that it says retired generals who endorsed conspiracy theory call on Austin and Milley to resign. I'm hereby
So
saying I do not think that Donald Trump won the election. I do believe Joe Biden won the election, but I still call on all of them to resign or at least be
yes,
fired.
yeah. So that's a
Just
good point.
don't equate
Yeah.
me with those people.
So the first time that Mick Lopez was on the show with us, he brought up that Flag Officers from America, or Flag Officers for America, which is a bunch of boomers from the Vietnam days who were upset, basically saying that Joe Biden didn't win the election. He did win the election because Donald Trump didn't do anything to appeal to anybody outside of his base, and he fumbled the COVID thing. So Joe Biden is the duly elected president of the United States. At the same time, the Flag Officers of America are batting 500 because Joe Biden should step down as president of the United States. And it has, again, nothing to do with who I voted for. I didn't vote for either of those assholes. Okay? But he has fucked this up from the jump. People are dead because of it. He's doubled down on it. He's holding nobody within his administration accountable. He should not be the president right now. Has nothing to do with his mental faculties or anything like that. He made a really bad decision, and people are fucking dead because of it. Somebody needs to go down, And last I checked, Joe Biden said the buck stops with me.
Yeah. Tulsi had some crazy domestic ideas, but man, Coconut Milk Mama would have handled this shit a lot better. I'm telling you.
Probably.
I mean, just the more I read about it and the more that comes out lately about this whole evacuation, it blows my mind that it even happened that way. I mean, just being at Hamid Karzai. I mean, I think I told a story one time when we were talking about aviation with the ISR guy about landing there like in the middle of the night, having to refuel the plane, and there was one guard at Hamid Karzai Airport, and he was asleep, and his AK-47 was in a rack across the room. And I just walked right past him and went and found the phone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the airport that we decided that we were going to evacuate and hold this massive, like basically the fall of Saigon all over again, massive evacuation. It blows my mind that was deemed appropriate, and it blows my mind that these people were not out of there before we had the date set. There was a date set for withdrawal. Why were we not evacuating these people when we still controlled Bagram, when we still controlled Kandahar? We knew this was going to end. Why are we waiting until the Taliban are making these massive gains in the 11 days or whatever they did it to try to get them out? Like what the hell?
I
Man?
know
Yeah,
that's a
and at
rhetorical
this point,
question.
like there's still Americans on the ground. Like, bottom line is, we left without evacuating everybody. Like, God knows what's going to happen to those people. Jesus.
So, Kyle, I know that's a rhetorical question, but I'm going to answer it for you. And I'm going to answer it more importantly for the
Please.
listeners because I know you know the answer. So, why did we wait until now? Well, I believe if my ability to read still exists, which I'm pretty sure it does, uh, it was along the lines of we did not want to project or we didn't want to create panic by starting to evacuate embassy staff, non-essential staff, SIV holders, Afghan allies, and all that shit. Basically, it was like that scene in was it Kingdom of Heaven with Orlando Bloom, where like, do you think making a man a knight makes him a better fighter? And he's like, yes, it does. This is one of those. This is one of those things. Like, do you think saying that the ANA is ready to take on the Taliban? They said yes, they are, and so they just fucking rolled with it. That's exactly what happened. They thought they really, honest to God, I don't know if they believed it, but they sure as fuck projected it. Projected that the ANA was in a position to withhold the Taliban and keep them at bay and out of Kabul and out of harm's reach or out of reach of harming Americans and our allies in the city. That's why it happened because they thought sure as shit. I think the word I'm looking for is hubris. Like they just assumed that everything would be okay because the Afghan National Army has 300,000 soldiers, despite like 50,000 of them not existing, another 30,000 dead in the last year and a half, and the rest not being paid.
But you know, to be fair, I thought they'd hold it too, at least for a few months. I think we all called it. I mean, at least for a few months, they
I
might be
think
able to hold,
we
and they
did
didn't.
say we figured the South would fall by September, right? I think that was our official projection
Right, right.
that they would have the South by September, and we thought that there'd be some sort of a battle line drawn along the lines of the old Northern Alliance versus Taliban borders.
Mhm.
So yeah, we did say that. But the administration and the Defense Department didn't even project that much, right? They're like, oh no, they're capable and they're competent and they got it. Well, they're none of those things. And they're not it's like the lack of competency is not for a lack of trying, right? There's a lot of ANA guys who really tried, who really believe in the idea of this free Afghanistan and want to do a good job, but they're hamstrung. They're hamstrung by corruption. They're hamstrung by their counterparts not getting paid. They're hamstrung by ghost soldiers. They're hamstrung by just getting the shit shelled out of them by the Taliban, who are being funded by a fucking country that we're partners with.
Yeah, yeah. So in some of my later deployments, I was up at BAF, and like all of like our generals up at there had all of like a bunch of Afghan generals working with them very closely. And so like if there was absolutely like no indication that, a lot of areas were ready to fall almost immediately, then I mean there had to have been. They had to have been able to see that this entire fucking pulling out and like this debacle that was about to come forward. Like there had to have been some way for them to see it. And if they didn't see it, then they're even less capable than we thought they were. Like,
Yes. And like when we look at it, people are like, well, when should they have started evacuating? Like probably the day after the Doha agreements were signed,
yeah,
realistically, right? Like We had a year and a half from the day and that's a bad agreement, by the way. Let's address that, right? Because Joe Biden is getting shit on, and rightfully so, right? He's the commander in chief. It's his fucking job now, and he has dropped the goddamn ball at every opportunity. Well, that deal that Zalmay Khalilzad agreed to with the Taliban is a really bad deal. And Zalmay Khalilzad, like, I'm not one for hyperbole, but holy fuck, if you could try somebody for being a piece of shit, he'd be number one because that's a bad deal. Okay, so yeah, the Taliban, in accordance with the agreement, the Taliban will stop targeting U.S. forces, which they did, right? And that's something that all these generals keep bringing up. We didn't have an American casualty for 18 months. It's because they weren't fighting us anymore, right? Of course, we didn't have an American casualty for 18 months, right? So there was that. They honored that. And then there was something in there that the Taliban would become a partner for counterterrorism operations to ensure that organizations that wish to do harm to America and our Western allies would not regroup or reform in Afghanistan. Which the State Department is still projecting this lie that the Taliban and Al Qaeda, one, are not associated or affiliated with each other, and they keep saying that Al Qaeda has been decimated. I think the term they keep using is metastasized.
Dude, they
Right?
won't even admit that the fucking Haqqani and Taliban are associated, despite Sirajuddin Haqqani being the number two, I think, number 2 or 3. It kind of
Well,
varies.
and Anas Haqqani's running fucking security in Kabul right now,
Yeah,
or is it Kaleem? It's either him or his uncle,
I
right?
don't
But
think it's Anas though. I don't think
it's
he's
probably
there.
his uncle. Then it's his uncle. Well, Anas has been
Anas
in
is the
Afghanistan.
yeah. For anyone who doesn't know, Anas Haqqani is the baby of the Haqqani family. They all love him, and we were holding him for a while, but we ended up
We were.
releasing him. Yeah,
Yeah, that's because they had the Akani network had that family, right?
yeah.
The hiking family, like basically they said so. Anas Akani was sentenced to die in Afghanistan, and the Akani network said if you kill him, we're going to kill these people, and so we ended up not killing him, and now Anas Akani is free. There's pictures of him walking around in Kabul, and his uncle, Jaludin's brother, is heading the security detail up in Kabul for the Taliban.
And for those who don't know, the Haqqani family is kind of like a bridge in that the Haqqani family has done a lot of smuggling and kidnapping operations on their own. They're very much affiliated with the Taliban government, and they also have connections to Al Qaeda. So the Taliban Al Qaeda connections kind of through the Haqqani family, and the Haqqani family is well respected within the Taliban. Sorry,
Yeah,
just had to give that aside.
The Haqqani were responsible for almost every suicide bombing in Kabul while they were there, and they it was pretty easy for them because they own the Paktika, and Coast region, which is southeast of Kabul and links over to Pakistan. So, like they've had very strong ties with the Taliban and also with Al Qaeda because they have to get their training and explosives from somewhere. And typically, Haqqani would generally be better fighters than like your typical Taliban, and they would also, but at the same time, they would also say like if you captured a Haqqani fighter, he'd say, "Oh, I'm Taliban," which makes it really weird for the leadership nowadays to be saying that they're not affiliated. Like the Haqqani have considered themselves Taliban basically since Mullah Omar swept through that region on his way to Kabul.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And this is when we talk about like that accountability. The accountability doesn't start or even stop with people resigning, right? But people need to be asking their elected, you know, officials about this shit because there's no reason that Antony Blinken should be up there saying shit like, Al Qaeda doesn't exist in the way it used to. Now they're probably stronger now than in 2001. They're definitely still affiliated with the Taliban. They definitely just pledged allegiance again to now Sheikh Habatullah Akhundzada. Like there, it's all there, and this is all open source shit. It's not like we're divulging classified information. This is out there for the world to fucking see. And our elected officials keep saying that that's not the case. Our appointed officials keep saying that's not the case. And Joe Biden keeps repeating that we accomplished our mission. I don't know if he understands what accomplished means because we did not accomplish the mission. We accomplished it, I don't know, 10 years ago when we killed bin Laden, maybe. And then we just, to quote the end of Charlie Wilson's War, we fucked up the end game over the last 10 years because the only change now is that bin Laden's dead.
Taliban's strong as ever. I mean, not like that was ever the. I don't think that was ever the intention. We've talked about that in the podcast before too. I don't want to
Right,
retread old ground, but
Yeah,
right.
yeah, and I mean, so what's the incentive for the Taliban now to not like work with Al Qaeda? There's absolutely none. Al Qaeda has been fully supportive of the Taliban's efforts in Afghanistan for 20 years. Like, there's absolutely no reason for them to turn on their closest allies now and work as a quote unquote, counterterrorism group in Afghanistan. No reason at all.
Yeah, and so like so with that, I think we've kind of ran the gamut on that. I want to talk about some of the just the bullshit misinformation that's been thrown around on like news media and in print here over the last week, right? And it starts with our great friends over at Fox News, because nothing says fair and balanced quite like Fox News, who like they're getting a little bit ridiculous, right? But I was over the last week or two, I've tried to watch the three major networks. And so I'm watching Fox News and I'm watching, I can't remember the name of the show, but they have all these different people on and they bring on Rob O'Neill, the guy that shot bin Laden, right? And it's more of the same shit. Like, oh, well, the problem is that Joe Biden is weak and that we needed to stay in Afghanistan. We needed to keep that 2,500 people there because they were maintaining stability. I'm like, well, that just goes to show that Navy SEALs are not the best when it comes to fucking policy, right? Because, like we said, that's just completely untrue. And then I slide over to CNN and I'm watching Chris Cuomo, and he's talking. He should have stepped down, by the way, when he was advising his brother. He's sitting here talking about to a. I want to say it was Jack Keane. I could be wrong though. I do know I saw Jack Keane, who's a retired general, talking to somebody, but he's pointing out like, oh, these Taliban, like they're not even Afghans. They show up speaking Urdu and Pashto. I'm like, does he not understand that half the fucking Afghans are Pashtun and they speak fucking Pashtun? So for the people out there, the Taliban are absolutely they are absolutely Afghans. Okay, a lot of them, especially the original members, were recruited out of refugee camps in Pakistan, but for the most part, they're all Afghans. They're trained, they're advised, and they're funded by Pakistan's ISI, but they are Afghans. So let's stop projecting this fucking myth that the Taliban are not Pashtun Afghans, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. The Taliban get like support from the ISI and protection in Pakistan from us because, we're not going to go after anyone unless it's Bin Laden in Pakistan. But other than that, like they're not sending hordes of fighters up into Afghanistan. Pakistan has enough problems to deal with. Pakistan basically deals with a like 9/11 style attack like every couple weeks down there thanks to the Tariqi Taliban Pakistan, which is Pakistan's version of the Taliban that wreak havoc over in the western areas of Pakistan. So they're basically Taliban get support from Pakistan's CIA, and that's about it. They're definitely Pashtun nationalists, which is another thing that people were saying that somehow the Taliban aren't Pashtun nationalists. They absolutely are. The
so
Northern
I got
Alliance
that
are Tajik nationalists and
for the most
Uzbek
part.
nationalists. Yeah.
So for the most part, Sue, you're right. And I pulled up that Washington Post article that I sent you and Kyle, or that's that, right? That's that myth number 5. So this lady claims, and I don't say claims as in she's wrong, right? But I don't know anything about her. But it's basically saying she's a national security expert. And her fifth myths about the Taliban, is that the Taliban doesn't reflect Afghanistan's diversity. She's saying that is untrue. Okay, she comes on here and says that basically this notion that the Taliban are Pashtun nationalists is untrue. Well, that's complete fucking bullshit because almost everybody in the Taliban is a Pashtun. They all speak Pashtun, and she points out the fact that there are Uzbeks, and there are a couple of Uzbeks within the Taliban ranks. The guy that speaks really good English, who they think might actually be from New Zealand, he's an ethnic Uzbek whose family is from Balk. That much I have figured out about him, right? So it's not out of the realm to have a non-Pashtun member of the Taliban. But then she points out that one Shia Hazara Taliban commander, and that's a fucking figurehead post. Like that is basically the bridge to ensure stability in Dakundi. He's not actually doing a fucking thing for the Taliban,
Yeah,
right?
there's
But to,
there's Tajik Taliban there's
yep,
non-Pashtun Taliban members because
yep.
guess what? They have an ideology that they're pushing out there as well beyond just the nationality stuff. But it originated in the middle of Pashtunistan and it spread from there. And even
Right.
if it hadn't, most of the country is Pashtun, so most of their members would have been Pashtun. Like
The Islamic
it's not
movement of
rocket science.
Uzbekistan, sure, yeah, they're not Pashtuns, but you know what? Ideologically, they're in line with this idea of this Wahhabist Deobandi strict Islam. Okay, the Turkestan Islamic movement from China, right? Again, not ethnic Pashtuns, but they adhere to that Deobandi sect of Sunni Islam. Okay, that doesn't remove the fact that 90+% of the Taliban is fucking Pashtun. They are Pashtun nationalists. And if you don't believe me, in 6 months, when all the cameras are turned away, let's see how long until they start slaughtering Hazaras and Turkmen and Uzbeks who don't fall in line with what they want.
Dude, I was really sad to see Dekundi fall. Like it's the nice little bastion of Hazaras, and they had the last female provincial governor of Afghanistan. So God knows if she's alive. I haven't seen anything about it.
I hope she is.
Oof.
It was so that brings up some good news, right? Like in the 17, not even 15 days, 16 days that we were evacuating people, man, they got 124,000 people out of Afghanistan. That's really fucking impressive.
Yeah.
And I think a lot, not a lot of that credit. That's because that's putting a percentage on it, right? But a credit needs to be given to those people. Like we saw it on Instagram. These these veteran like ran pages or just people who have any veterans with Instagram accounts coordinating to get people out of the country was outstanding. I think they called it the digital Dunkirk, and it was impressive to watch. And at the same time, it was heartbreaking to see these people like just bearing their soul, trying to get their friend Khalid, who was an interpreter for them 12 years ago, out of the country. And like, you got guys that are stuck in Helmand, they can't get out of Lashkar Gah, people getting turned away at the gates, people who showing up 3-4 days straight, and they just can't fucking leave, right? And like we said, there's like 200 or so Americans still in Afghanistan, and the administration says that we're going to get you out. Which, I mean, does anybody believe them at this point? They'll probably leave. Like, so this is something that the news has really jumped on, is that oh, well, all these Americans, the Taliban are going to take as hostages. For what? What is there to trade? There's nothing to trade. They got the country. They're good. So when the Taliban were the government in the mid 90s, 96 to 2001, Western NGOs operated in Afghanistan, right? And so it's not outside the realm of possibility. I'm not saying it's a for sure thing, but it's not outside the realm of possibility that the Taliban will let the American citizens, not everybody else, but the American citizens, get to HKaya and get on a plane and get back to the States once regular flights resume. Because, they're trying, I do think they are trying to be a little more diplomatic, at least here in the near term. If it means letting the 200 or so Americans leave, fine. What the hell do they care? They want them gone anyways.
Yeah, they
For
want
the
them out. They
people,
don't want a problem.
yeah, for the people that are worried about, oh, all those people are suddenly gonna flood into America and we don't know who they are. Well, don't worry about it. They're stopping off in other countries. They're getting checked. Everyone's going to be checked before they come into America. That's as long as proper procedure is followed. Like
Right. And
it
well,
should be
so
fine.
there you're talking about, that was Stephen Miller, who's like the personal like advisor to Donald Trump. Stephen Miller, like I was saying this earlier talking to my father-in-law. I don't think Donald Trump's a racist. I think Donald Trump's thing is, if you're poor, I don't care about you. Stephen Miller, on the other hand, might
He's
be
not
an
wrong.
actual Stephen Miller might be an out and about racist, right? But he's sitting there on Fox News saying we're going to bring in 120,000 Afghan refugees, and we're not vetting them. It's like we had to delay flights because we were getting bottlenecked in Al Udeid trying to vet these people. The person Stu and I talked to today said so far they've found three out of literal thousands. They have found three, and you know what? That's a pretty good success rate. And more importantly, those Afghans who are coming to this country are more American than many of the Americans that live in this country now, and have every right to come here and have every right to get the chance to succeed and make something of themselves. So
Agreed.
I absolutely look forward to them getting here, from what we've seen so far and some of the pictures of Afghans arriving to America, they've received warm welcomes. And that's good to see, because these are people who, like we said last week, risked their lives and risked the lives of their families trying to improve their country up until it just could not be done anymore. Why would we not want those people with that type of spirit and that type of work ethic in this country?
Yeah, and they
I
love
yeah.
America. Like they were nothing but supportive while we were there, and they absolutely love America and only want the best for our country. And it's sad to see what happened to their country, but they're going to be good Americans.
Yeah, and we need to take care of them. I mean, at the very least, we need to get our people out. We need to get the Westerners out. We need to get the people that helped us out. We at least owe that to them. I mean, we completely. Well, it wasn't just the United States, but I mean, all these events that have happened over the past 20 years have completely destabilized their country. They don't really have a home. They're not going to ever be safe there. And if we don't bring them back, we've failed them. And anyway, that's the ultimate failure in the mission. I think.
And I think the unfortunate thing now is when we look at where Afghanistan stands now, with, like we said, the couple hundred Americans still there who will probably get out. But the Taliban has no incentive to allow those SIV applicants, to get to the airport, or other people who wanted to try to apply. I was talking to somebody at the height of all of this, and he's explaining to me, like, he's trying to help get a family to the airport, and they don't have they qualify for a special immigrant visa, but they don't have one yet, and they're being told to go to the Ministry of Interior to apply for a special immigrant visa. This is like August 23rd. The Taliban run the fucking Ministry of Interior. You think they're going to let more Afghans leave? They'd already come out and said, stop leaving the country and help us rebuild it, right? And we're leaving behind a lot of good people who need to be who should be in the states, and so we owe it to those who were able to get out to help them. And who knows, maybe we'll get lucky and we'll be able to get a lot more of these people out. I'm seeing a lot of the various Instagram pages that we follow, that people are working on getting them out through land routes to, Turkmenistan and Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. So that's pretty fucking impressive that you have people like that out there who are trying this hard to get people out, and the government couldn't show 1/5 of that will and that determination.
Yeah, big props to to the guys at the Panjaway podcast working with World Relief Seattle. Recently, we posted about that. Doing a lot of good out there. So
Yeah,
anyone
I think
listening,
they're
if
up.
you've donated, thank you so much, and hopefully they're able to help those efforts as well.
I think last I saw they were over $3,000. So that's
Awesome.
pretty impressive. That's going to go a long way.